Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Stanville&S's webinar on optimizing people and projects for higher performance. Today joining us are Val Higgins and Christy Weierbach, who are both part of our Stanville&S team here. Just a few housekeeping items before we dive in. There is a handout section on the GoToWebinar pane. If you open that up, you can download the presentation that they are going to walk through today. And if you have any trouble, the recording and the handout will be distributed after the webinar in a follow-up email. We are offering CPE credits today, and there are 3 polling questions that we have to get through just to make sure everybody is sticking with us here, and we have to get 85% participation in order to move on. So those will be throughout the webinar today. And also, to get your CPE credit, you must fill out the survey. I know a couple of people sometimes miss this, but it is the very last question on the survey. We just need a simple yes or no, and these will be distributed in 5 to 7 business days after the conclusion of this webinar. And speaking of the survey, just let us know what you like and didn't like. This is always helpful feedback for our presenters and to come up with different topics that we can have our experts look into and provide to you. And if you have any questions, there is a question panel. We do not monitor the chat box, so expand that question panel, ask your question, and if we do not have enough time to get to the questions at the end of this presentation, we will have Val and Christy reach out individually. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Val.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our presentation today. As Kaylee said, we're going to be talking about optimizing people and projects for higher performance, and I'm going to be talking about, in particular, optimizing projects for higher performance. I did have an opportunity to look through the list of today's registrants, and I was happy to see that there's some of you that I've met and worked with, and I'm happy that we can spend some time together today. For those of you that I haven't met, I just wanted to give a brief introduction of myself and my background. I know I'm aging myself, but I do bring 30 years of experience in the A&E industry with me. I literally grew up in the industry. My dad owned a civil engineering land survey firm and grew up in the industry. I chose to go down more of the business side and got my bachelor's degree in accounting. And while I left the family business, I did stay in the industry. Probably about 20 years ago, I got really interested in ERP systems and became a consultant for a company called Axiom. They're actually no longer in business. They were purchased by Deltek, but worked for them for many years. And having a small family, a young family, it was hard to travel. So I went to work for a client of mine in Arizona, Scottsdale, that's where I'm located. And I worked for that firm for 13 years, multidiscipline, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineering firm. So really got a lot of boots on the ground experience. And that's where I discovered, as geeky as it sounds, my passion for project management. About 5 years ago, I went back into consulting and worked for Axiom, then for Deltek. And I had the good fortune to be part of a team that developed a project management training curriculum and really was able to focus on that area where I do have a lot of passion, really diving into best practices for project management, ERP systems, and project delivery. And last November, I was fortunate enough to join the Stanville&S team. Super exciting for me to be able to really have no boundaries. I'm not limited to just working with ERP systems, but I've really been able to branch out and work with many clients on assessing their operations and their project management processes and tools. And interestingly enough, we're actually going through that process right now ourselves. So a lot of the topics I'm going to cover today, you know, I've helped a lot of clients with, but also had the opportunity to apply that for firms where I'm actually working with the people and the tools and the technology. So that's a little bit about me, just to give you my background. And like I said, I'm excited to talk about today's content. So let's get going. We're going to focus on the results from the 2018 Deltek Clarity Survey. As you all know, Deltek is a well-recognized leader in ERP solutions for the A&E space. And so every year I really look forward to the survey coming out and following the trends. And I in particular focus on the metrics that are in the project management and project performance area of the survey. So we're going to focus on some of the top results that came out of the survey. So the top two project management concerns of the firms that responded to the firm survey were fostering more mature project management processes and being able to give project managers the tools and the resources they need to actively manage their projects. Additionally, firms reported that inexperienced project managers were one of their top 3 challenges this year. This was really interesting to me. Only 47% of the respondents, so less than half of the firms responding, actually follow formal project management processes in their office. And of that less than half, for only 75% of their projects. That tells us that this is an area that really needs attention within our industry. 20% of projects are over budget. 25% of projects are behind schedule, and overall respondents reported an 11% drop in project reporting abilities. So we're going to take a little deeper dive into each of these topics, but first we'd like to have our first polling question. Do you have a formal project management training plan in place and implementing it, I should say, for your firm? And it's just a yes or no response we're looking for with this poll. So results are coming in quickly here. I'm not too surprised at the trend I'm seeing here. We've got a 2/3 no at this point and just about a third on the yes. And thank you for all of you getting right on that. We've got 81% of you that have put in your poll vote at this point. Oh, somebody withdrew their answer. There we go. So 85% of you responded. Thank you very much for that. And again, not surprising, 78% of you all said no. We're going to talk about how important this really can be for your firm. Like I mentioned, we're actually going through this process right now, and it's been pretty eye-opening for me going through the same process I would go through with an AE firm, but with a CPA firm. What it really ingrained in me is that project management has a lot of consistency throughout industries. So kind of the way that I've approached this today is splitting up these results into 3 topics: people, processes, and technology. We really need all 3 of those to be successful and be the best we can be. So let's talk about people first. And we saw that one of our results was a top challenge: inexperienced project managers. So what are the challenges that firms face with inexperienced project managers? So does this sound familiar to you all? You have an employee who comes to you fresh out of college. They've obtained their degree, they're an EIT or architect in training, and they're working under the supervision of firm leaders for a period of time. Then the time comes, they go and they pass their certification. Now they're professionally registered, still maybe working under some supervision. And then that magical day comes. One of their supervisors, department heads, comes to them and says, "Congratulations, this is your project. You're now a project manager." I'm guessing some of you are sitting at your desk kind of nodding. This is what I've seen typically and experienced in all of the firms that I've worked in. Most project managers are promoted from technical positions, and there's generally, and as we've seen with our poll results, not a formal PM training plan. Inexperienced PMs typically may not be involved in developing their own budgets or scopes. It's pretty common for a senior person in the firm to be negotiating with the client and again, bringing that information to the project manager. It can be really problematic if there's not a process in place to bring that PM up to speed and really explain to them the intricacies of the budget and the scope. A lot of times inexperienced PMs don't have really strong client management skills. They may not have the history we have with the clients. We may have an assumption that this is a white glove client, but our inexperienced PM may not know what is really required to make sure that client's needs are met, to identify stakeholders, to define success elements in the projects. It's something that we really need to focus on. So what are the solutions that we can put in place for these challenges? In your firm, you should have a defined, published project manager role. What are the responsibilities of a project manager? And what is the development path to get there? That development path should include some formal training. It's really critical when we're defining that PM role that we set expectations for performance. Let's not assume that our team understands, our key performance indicators. What are the margins that we expect to hit? The expectations of utilizing staff. All of those things, we can't really make assumptions, and that should all be included in a defined and published PM role for within your firm. Invest in formal PM training. So it's again, seems to be the typical path where we're mentoring. We'll have more experienced team leaders and team leaders mentoring, but formal PM training, do your PMs understand the financial management of projects? Do they understand that project management is not an administrative duty? It's an actual skill and a billable skill at that. When you invest in formal PM training, make sure it's specific to your industry. There's all kinds of great resources out there. PSMJ, AEC PMA is new on the scene and pretty dynamic. Make sure that it's specific to your ERP and your technical tools. So if we've rolled new technical tools out, let's make sure the team is thoroughly trained on those so that we can have optimal efficiency in their use. If you are using an ERP, really recommend having your project managers trained and having the ability to be hands-on users. It's kind of old school and common for us to consider an ERP an accounting tool. In truth, today, most of them out there that are built for the AE industry are really a project management tool as well as a financial tool. Let's get your teams trained so they can have ultimate use of that system. Define budget and scope expectations for your inexperienced PMs. Be detailed. Scope writing, in my opinion, is an art. And in many firms, it's common to pull up a fee proposal on a like project and just plop that scope into a new fee proposal. It's really critical that your team understands what are the inclusions, and even possibly more important, we should be calling out the exclusions, right? What isn't included in that? That really paves the way for good client relations when we do wander into areas that are outside of scope, and we may be needing to have those hard conversations with our clients about additional services. Train your team on how to write an excellent scope. Chances are you may have an expert already in-house, someone who's been doing it for years and years and years. Considering having an in-house scope writing kind of lunch and learn, critical skill. Define your expectations for your project managers on written and verbal communication, internally and externally. So where do we expect them to be recording information internally? What is the expectation for communicating upstream with our projects? When do we need to let someone know we might be in trouble? And externally, what are our expectations for keeping our clients in the loop? Do we want our PMs to send out regular status reports? Do we have some kind of way of documenting challenges and issues and additional services and change management? Again, let's just not assume that people are picking this up by osmosis or watching others. We want to define that and make sure that we're setting the stage for our project managers to be excellent at what they do. This one's a tough one. A lot of firms are really hesitant to tie expectations to your PM reviews and promotion opportunities. So I've just been in so many firms where, we may be reviewing project results and performance, but unwilling to take it to the next level of bringing that into a performance review. Keep in mind, this doesn't always have to be punitive, right? We want to empower our PMs. And one of the ways we can do that is by, reviewing their performance and their work and helping them learn where they might have kind of fallen off or where they've done really excellent and sharing that out with the team. So don't be afraid to have some of those hard conversations. Tie expectations to PM reviews for optimal performance. So let's talk about the processes component of the survey results that we're reviewing. As we saw, many of you don't have defined processes or training plans. So what are the key components of defining project management processes within your own firm? Consistency is key. I could probably be saying this on every slide like a broken record. Consistency is critical. So one of the things that I've experienced over the years, generally when I go in to start working with someone, one of the first things I'll ask about is output. What output are you looking for to manage your business? If we don't have consistency in input, tools, management, recording, it's going to be extremely challenging for you to have consistency in output and the ability to effectively manage all of those parts. So I would recommend a project management standards manual is a must. It's not optional, it's a must for every firm. If it's not in writing, you can't hold your PMs accountable. So your project management standards manual might start off super simple. Generally, if I'm delivering a project management bootcamp or training to a client, during that training, I might throw out a few ideas, like when should we be having certain meetings? And that could be the first page in your manual. So it could be a daunting task to think about. My best advice is just give it a start. Just give it a start. Simple is okay. But as things come up where we're defining rules, processes, expectations, let's put them in writing in one standard manual where everyone can reference it. Engage your team. So this is really interesting and something that we employed in our recent project management standards adoption. We sent out a survey to our team. We asked them, what tools do you think you need that you don't have? What tools are you leaning on the most heavily? What reports do you think you don't have? Which reports are you leaning on heavily? We even asked the question, do you perceive yourself as a project manager? Because I don't think it's that uncommon for someone to kind of get promoted into that position, but they may not really think they are. So ask your team, don't assume. It's a great way to start off on this process, and your team will feel engaged and valuable. Their input is valuable. Identify the tools and processes you'll use in each stage of your project. So we adopted a project life model. What are the stages through the life of the project? And our project management standards manual is built around those stages. So identify the tools and the processes you'll use in each stage. Be detailed. Include, how you're going to use the tools and how we're going to require project maintenance. It should be really a guide, a how-to for the best way to manage our projects. Develop a go, no-go assessment tool, include it in your processes. Taking on projects just for the sake of taking on work isn't helpful, right? So we want to make sure that we can completely complete the project successfully, that we're going to be able to obtain our profit goals. If we just take on work that doesn't make sense for us or clients that don't make sense for us, it's definitely going to impact our profitability. We could be creating dissatisfied clients, and really, arguably maybe more important, demotivating our project managers. So if you don't have a go-no assessment tool, I really recommend create one and use that when you're taking on new work. Develop a team of project management champions. So, we did this, and I've worked with a couple firms who have done this. It's really amazing the impact. This team should be the ones that are researching, that are continually learning and growing and sharing back with the team. You want to identify them as leaders and mentors to your project management team. And when you're building this team of champions, don't limit it to just PMs. Include a finance team leader, because let's face it, project managers and finance team need to partner shoulder to shoulder on bringing home projects successfully. Consider bringing in an expert on your ERP or your industry. Having an outside opinion, a look in, can be really helpful, especially, and we kind of ran into this, we're going to have differences of opinion on our own team, an inability to want to change. So having kind of someone to guide you from the outside can be really helpful in that capacity. PM training isn't a one and done event. So, I'm guessing a lot of you have had some kind of boot camp or training. What I've seen is when it is kind of one and done, well, we might start off strong, but then we kind of go back to the old way of doing things. So for best success after a training event or a workshop, I really recommend that you develop a regular cadence of PM trainings internally and externally. It doesn't always have to be going out and paying for a workshop or paying for someone else. Your project management champions can continue to have, lessons learned in other meetings internally. So let's go to our second poll question now. Do you have a published project management standards manual? Just a yes or no, and let's see if we can get as good of a response as we got last time. You guys are coming in quick. Again, not surprised at what the trend is showing here. So right now at 80% of you voting, we've got an 81% no and a 19% yes. Again, I'm really not surprised by these results as they're coming in, especially with small to mid-sized firms. I think sometimes we think that like a published manual is maybe overkill. Okay, we've got 83% of you, 84 now. All right. Thank you guys for really getting in there and responding to this. So 84% of you voted. We came in with a 79% no and a 21% yes. So for that 21% of you, great job. And for the 79%, hopefully some of the suggestions you're getting from today might help you and motivate you to kind of get started and going down that road. So moving on to the third section, I want to talk about the technology piece and the findings of the Clarity survey and those interesting percentages. So a challenge that respondents faced was the tools and resources for project managers to actively manage their projects. So what I really wanted to call out here too is that managing projects is an action item. It's not a title. And over the years, I've really faced some challenges because a lot of times when we come into offices to start helping them define their processes or train their team, project managers feel like their workload is so heavy. They're a technical person, they're probably a client manager and a project manager, and now we want them to do more. So it's really important to convey to our team that project management is a skill and a billable skill. And I think setting that foundation really helps with the rest of the process. So we want to train on internal processes as well as just general project management skills. So Don't assume our team knows, where all the tools and resources they need to be using are to be found or what is required. We want to make sure that we educate them on that. And we also want to hold them accountable. So having people use one-off tools or different tools, again, is going to be really challenging for us to find data or to have consistency in data for that output reporting that I know you're all really looking for. We want to give them easy access for visibility into project performance. So again, kind of drawing on my own recent experience, we had some reporting challenges. So we found a third-party program that's allowed us to pull our data out of our system into easy to access clickable dashboards for our team. So if you have those kinds of challenges, think outside the box. It's critical that our team has the ability to quickly see their information. Again, we want to use consistency in tools. So let's use the same estimating and budgeting tools. If you're using an ERP, and it allows you to let your team do hands-on estimating and budgeting within the system, cannot recommend that enough. A lot of folks are afraid to let our PMs in the system, but it makes sense. Now we can have opportunity pipeline tracking. Now we can have all kinds of projection based on backlog and opportunity. Really consider using those tools if you haven't yet. We want to make sure they have resourcing, planning, and scheduling tools. Again, if maybe I'm using Excel, but my ERP offers that, consider trying to move over. The more data we have in one place, the more efficient for everyone. We want to make sure our team is having regularly scheduled kickoff, status, and closeout meetings. Kickoff is one that more firms have than status and closeout. Closeout are the least held meetings because we're busy. Projects, it's like the Hydra. You cut the head off one and 10 more have popped up. But lessons learned are invaluable. They're a great mentoring opportunity. They're a great way for us to share what we've learned to be even more better at what we do. Provide feedback on PM performance. So with our reporting, if we want to increase our profits, if we want to decrease our over budget and behind schedule, we need to be reviewing our project managers. And again, we've got to be willing to have hard conversations because we want to build the best team we can. Be willing to try new things and fail fast. Again, drawing on my own recent experience, this is something our team is really trying to adopt. That this is how we've always done it mantra can really stop us from moving forward. Things are changing in our industry, technology, the world all the time. We got to keep up with it or ahead of it if we want to be the best we can be. So try new things, fail fast. If it doesn't work, we pivot, we try something else. Typically, we're not going to break anything. So reporting is critical to maximize efficiency and increase our profits and client satisfaction. Like we've talked about, we've got to make sure our PMs have the right reports. If you're not using an ERP, I recommend investing in one. The return on investment will be exponential. Time and expense entry, not a once a week activity. So this is a universal challenge. We need to be requiring daily time entry if we want to have accurate reporting. Project reports should be meaningful and the content relevant to your PMs. More is not better. So if your PMs have 30 reports to choose from, chances are they may be overwhelmed. Let's give them 3 or 4 reports that really give them the meat that they need. Project reports aren't useful if I'm not maintaining my projects. Dates are critical in projections. Budgets need to be updated, especially when we have change in change orders. Don't assume your PMs understand all the terminology on your project report. So there's terms running around in our industry like earned, spent, effort, reported percent complete. What do those mean? Make sure you sit down with your team. Again, have a lunch and learn, go through your key reports, make sure everybody really understands how to read them and where the information is coming from. Your key reports should also have KPIs in them, things to pop out at you. If I'm over budget, make a field red. If I'm behind schedule, make it turn a color. Those will give your people and your principals a quick way to identify projects where they need to take a deeper dive. We want to build an environment that's empowering, not punishing. So again, lessons learned are meant to help us be better, not to be kind of, punishing activities. So kind of to wrap it all up, we need all three. We need people, we need processes, we need technology. They're all critical for us to be success. And when we have the right people and we train them and the right processes and solid technology, and we keep the client at the center of our focus, I think we're more bound for success. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Christy, who's going to present on optimizing people for higher performance.
Thank you so much, Val. As I was sitting here listening to, everything that you shared, it dawned on me that, there are a lot of great lessons in what you were sharing that could be applicable to all roles in the company and the various practices within a firm. So there's a lot of great things that could be applied not just to the PM role, but, more at a higher level to the whole organization. So the portion that I'm going to focus on is people in general. Some of the things that I talk about relate to the PMs, but it's more about the workforce as a whole in your firms. And so when I was reviewing the Clarity report, I pulled out the major themes or topics of concern to the A&E industry. These items on this list probably are not very surprising to you. I think not only do firms in the architecture and engineering industries, see these as challenges as they look forward and look towards the future, 2019 and beyond. But this does apply to other industries as well. So if we do have people dialing in today that aren't necessarily in the A&E space, a lot of these are common themes, and the advice that I'll share with you can be applied outside of this industry as well. But two of the items that were really surprising to me on this list were the business development and the business processes. So we're going to talk about that deeper as we move forward with my slides. But I first want to open up the poll question because I'm curious, of the items that were shared on the trend list, which one do you see as the most pressing for your organization? As you think about not necessarily today, but looking towards the future as you head into 2019, what does that look like? Do you think that employee turnover, whether voluntary or involuntary, would apply to you? Are you more worried about those baby boomers that are getting ready to leave your company? Do you feel that maybe performance has been pretty steady, but you'd like to take it to that next level? Are you thinking about business processes internally, maybe looking to document some of the things that you do that are just more generally understood? Or are you shifting your attention to business development and thinking differently about that as you move forward? So we will need 85% participation. We're climbing up there pretty quickly, and we're really all over the map. So this is exciting. I think you'll enjoy seeing the results once we are able to share them. All right, need a couple more of you to either wake up or make a decision. So if you're not quite sure, maybe you're divided between two of them, just do eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I guess. But a couple more percent and we'll get those results out to you. Kaylee will be sharing them. And so you can see right now performance and development are, that's the highest group, but a lot of you are challenged with all of these items on here. So it just speaks to, whether you did or did not respond to the survey, that, these are pressing issues that we need to be worried about. And if we're not right here in the moment, it certainly could be something that we should keep an eye on as we move forward. So let's go ahead and talk about business development. So historically, in the A&E space, you would have what's called the seller-doer model. Many of you are probably familiar with that, but basically you have somebody who is technically awesome, if you will, who is then also tasked with building relationships and trying to secure more work, extending those relationships on additional projects and so forth. And so that model has remained steady for a long time, and I think still predominantly is the way that A&E firms approach business development. However, based on the results of the Clarity Report, that's shifting. Firms are now looking to say, hey, do we need to have somebody who is primarily dedicated to business development, to really nurturing relationships, going out there and extending the company name and the reputation and so forth further out than maybe you have done business in the past. So as you're looking at your goals and your strategic plan for next year, this might be a topic that you just want to at least put on the map to start talking about and see if it is something that you want to do differently going forward. Business development is not for everyone. It definitely takes a certain skill set. So somebody who says, hey, I want to do business development, but maybe they're really reserved and quiet and just really good about, performing tasks and checking off a to-do list, that might not be the role for them. So you have to be careful. If you do look to make a change in this area and, dedicate somebody solely to this responsibility, just think about the type of skills that that person will need so that way they can naturally be motivated to go out there and try to increase business. It's not something that, if they're not comfortable with, they're not going to consistently be energized to be able to go out there and build business. So the next item is voluntary turnover. Yes, we hope that there's not too much involuntary, but we'll talk about that on another slide in a couple here. But as far as voluntary turnover, this is a concern. And why is that? Well, it could vary based upon each firm. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But I have a feeling that it's going to tie closely to our next slide, which gets into generations. But before we go there, I want to touch on this model here, Hertzberg's two-factor theory. Not sure if you have seen it. You might have seen it or presented in a different way. But essentially, if we want to keep our workforce engaged, motivated, excited, we have to focus on their strengths, but we also have to focus on, giving them recognition, giving them maybe more responsibility or challenges, etc. We have to allow them to grow and maybe even see advancement opportunities within your firm. If we fail to do that, that definitely could be one of the reasons why employees look to leave your firm. On the other side of that equation, while many people are quick to either just throw more money, throw more benefits at individuals, you can see that it's not on the job satisfaction side. So what that means is that, if you just use money or benefits as a way to motivate and excite, it's not going to be sustainable. But if you're not competitive in the marketplace, it definitely could chip away at the satisfaction that your employees have working for you. So you definitely want to make sure you're doing benchmarking and remaining competitive with salary and benefits. But quite honestly, the bigger bang for your buck, or the ways that you should invest your money, is more along the lines of development opportunities, recognition, achievement, etc. So let's talk about generations. In the past, I think we've all been guilty of trying to do a one-size-fits-all approach, whether we do it through our recognition programs, whether we do it with benefits, whether we do it with the way that we train or the types of training we offer. And no longer are you going to see that that will be acceptable. So each generation, this chart here was pulled together from various resources, so I can't attest to the actual validity of it, but it does give us at least some insight as to the way that each of these generations think, or what are they most motivated by. So if you look specifically at the behavior, you can see that, when they look at roles, baby boomers are going to challenge those roles, especially if they don't agree with them. Gen Xers want to change the roles. They want to say, hey, we need to do things differently. Maybe it's because they have a more efficient way, etc. Gen Y, they don't want to change, they want to create. They want new rules, they want things different. And then Gen Z, they look to be the group that wants to customize. So, The millennials, the Gen Ys, they created the roles, but now Gen Z says, hey, no, we want to customize these so it's just unique to me. So we're not going to go through this whole chart, but you can see how quickly and easily that a one-size-fits-all approach will not work and will not take us into the future with our workforce. And if we're not in tune to what really motivates our employees, we might lose them to the competition who is more dialed into this. So you can see the younger generations definitely are about team, collaborative. They like face-to-face or frequent and regular communication. And quite honestly, many people are still not good with communication. So that might be the place that you start is, providing more information, more timely information. And it goes back to what Val was saying as well, is that, you've got to get the information out there so people know what's expected of them, so that way they do have the opportunity to perform to the best of their ability and hopefully understand more of the reason that they're performing certain functions or tasks, etc. So as we look at succession planning and we think about, off the top of my mind, are the baby boomers, right? Naturally, when we think succession planning, we're talking about the older generations. We're talking about those who are in leadership roles and making sure that we have somebody to come up behind them. Well, unfortunately, this was one of the concerns that the A&E firms had, was that, look, we're not doing a good enough job of looking at all employees. So there are a lot of technical individuals who probably fall in that baby boomer generation that we need to be thinking about. They have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of experience, and what are we going to do to capture that before they leave? Also, now's the perfect time to say, hey, are we actually going to just look for an apple-to-apple replacement? Or are we going to look to maybe think about that role differently in the future? So my last slide that I have in about 10 minutes, we will look at what the future looks like as far as trends and so forth. So as you think about those trends and you connect back to this succession planning, you might be thinking differently about the person that you bring in to help coach and mentor to be the person that slides into that role, or a similar role, if you will. Development is definitely something on the minds of the younger generations. Older generations, I don't know that they're as connected to the development. They're really just saying, hey, I want to continue to do what I love, and I'm happy to, ride out into the sunset whenever that time may be. But Joseph Grenny from Vital Smarts said that there's 3 things that employees are looking for as it relates to their experience within an organization. So we want to connect to the purpose. Why are people doing what they're doing? How does that contribute to the overall strategic goals and initiatives that the company is looking to pursue, not only now and today, but in the future? How can we get our employees more connected to the company? So it goes back to where I talked about that frequent communication, frequent face-to-face conversations, etc. Is that happening enough in your organizations? Do you offer enough mentoring options for the younger generations to be able to, gain some of that insight from the older generations that'll be leaving the workforce? And the last piece here really hones in on that development piece, and that Joseph Grenny believes that people want to know that they can master skills. So that might not necessarily be, going from technical to management. That might be just, hey, show me new projects, show me different types of projects. Maybe I want to learn a different discipline. And that is the way in which we can allow employees to continue to learn and grow, even if maybe their path isn't in a leadership path, if you will. So these 3 things, if we can nail these 3 items and really hone in on them in the future, I guarantee the level of engagement in your organization is going to continue to climb, and you'll be in a much better place than you were today or earlier this year. So let's think about our next slide here, performance, and finding the right fit. I talked about, do we want to hire apple to apple, or are we looking to hire apple to orange, if you will? It really is about finding the right person for the role that you have open or will have open as part of your succession planning process. You want to allow employees to play to their strengths. And if they can't, they're not going to be naturally motivated and excited about the work that they do. So getting employees put in a role where they're going to shine, it does amazing things. We do that here at Stanbaugh Ness. We, find out what are those top 5 strengths of each individual person that works here, and we make sure that a majority of the time they're working on things that they're excited about. That is critical. And equally critical is making sure we don't put somebody in the wrong role. So Val's talking a lot about the project managers and that, there's a lot of responsibility in that role, and there's a lot that could go wrong in that role if you don't have the right person. So just because somebody is amazing from a technical perspective does not mean that they're going to be equally amazing as a project manager or even as part of the executive leadership team. So you have to be very careful to position people in the right way in your organization, because if not, your performance is not going to continue to accelerate, if you will. You're either going to remain steady or you could actually see a decline in your performance going forward. So let's continue to talk about performance. This chart here was published by the Employee Engagement Group back in 2013, and quite honestly, the percentages haven't changed all that much. You can see that 30% are helping to row the boat forward. They're actively rowing the boat. You can see that 18% approximately of your workforce is actively disengaged. So that means they're probably sitting there on their computer right now looking for a new job and just counting down the days until they can leave. Or they might be undermining their peers and leadership team just because they're so unhappy with the work that they're doing. Then you have the other group in the middle who are just disengaged. They may not be looking for another job, but they're just going through the motions day in and day out. Well, what does this tell me as far as what we should be focused on going forward? So the people that are truly engaged, we're hitting the mark with those individuals. We need to identify who those are in our organization. We need to figure out why are they doing so well, why are they so happy, and can we continue to do that with some of the others that are in the disengaged group. There's a lot we can learn by the people who are actively engaged in helping us row the boat forward. The group at the back of the boat who is probably trying to row it in the opposite direction, you need to figure out very quickly how to get them out of your organization. You can do it peacefully and you can help them find a new opportunity, but until you can get them out of the organization, they're going to continue to affect others in that disengaged group and possibly increase the actively disengaged percentages, which would be very alarming and counteractive to all the initiatives that you're trying to achieve today and in the future. So how do we know if we're being successful or not? Traditionally, people may or may not be looking at the hiring process. How long does it take to fill a role? What is our turnover rate? Is it at a healthy balance? Are we under 10%? Are we over 10%? Is that expected or not expected based upon the different projects or the work that the company has been performing? And then level of engagement. Have you done a survey? Val talked about surveying project managers. Well, you could do that with all your employees. Find out why they continue to work with you and why they might be considering leaving. So those are the common statistics that people frequently measure, and these were, talked about briefly in the Clarity Report, but the one that I want you to pay attention to is the second bullet point there. The hire to the billable percent there. So how long does it take from the time that you bring them in the door on day one to you actually get your technical person billable? What is that path, and are there opportunities to become more efficient and maybe reduce that window to be able to bring revenue in the door more quickly with those newly hired individuals? Is the training an area that needs to be done better, more efficient? Is the training holding back some employees from, getting out there and actually doing some billable work? That might be an area that you want to focus on because it is a top concern of those who had responded to the Clarity Report. So I have 2 more slides here, and then we will open it up for questions. Business processes. I talked about how this one was one that I was really surprised by, and so I thought it was important for us to refer back to Edwards Deming. he said that 94% of problems in companies are the systems, and maybe they're not set up right or people aren't accountable to them, whatever that might be. If you are having trouble with performance, first look at your system, because I think focusing on that will definitely get you further along than just going right to blaming people for maybe the challenges that you're experiencing internally. Historically, I don't think people have done a very good job of documenting business processes, so that has a ripple effect. You see inconsistency, there's no standards, it's word of mouth, well, that's just the way we've always done it. Try being a new employee coming into your company, and they may be thoroughly confused if you don't have the right tools in place that they could be brought up to speed pretty quickly. Having the right business processes in place that lean on technology definitely could help you reduce that window that we talked about on the prior slide of getting somebody from hire to billable more quickly. So keep in mind that business processes, nobody likes to document processes, and it takes away from your time of being chargeable. However, think about all the knowledge that you're going to capture through that exercise. While it may take away from the amount of hours you can count as billable or chargeable, in the long run, I think you're going to see the benefits of that as you see your baby boomers and some of the older generations exit your organization. So as promised, I said we would talk about some trends, and these weren't necessarily outlined in the Clarity Report. It's something that Stanbaugh Ness has paid close attention to. What are those hard trends? What are those things that are absolutely going to happen in the future? And, what are some soft trends that might happen in the future? Well, I can tell you right now, demographics is a hard trend because baby boomers will retire and younger generations will continue to move up into the workforce, taking on leadership roles, maybe taking on some ownership responsibilities, etc. So you definitely have to pay attention to that. And then technology. Just think about, over the past 5 years or so, how much a smartphone has changed the way that we live and the way that we do our work. It has removed so many devices. We can watch TV on our smartphones, we can take pictures, we can talk, we can, surf the internet, we can do GPS. God, I would be so lost if I didn't have my GPS when traveling out of state especially. But anyway, you need to think about how that's going to impact you and your industry. Not only, how it's going to change the way that you might take photos at a project. You might use a drone so you can get the information or the pictures, images more quickly. But just think about how you communicate with employees and think about the skills that are going to be required to continue to use the new technology as it constantly changes. That's not going to slow down. It's going to get faster. And as we look at, artificial intelligence, automation, Bitcoin, all of those terms that are constantly being talked about, how is that going to impact your organization and the type of person you need in each role to embrace it and help carry the company forward? So that's why it's so important now to start thinking about who are those people we want to hire. We might be looking at oranges and bananas instead of apples. So it's not easy, but it is definitely worth it, because then people can play to their strengths, and that's when you're going to see how performance can be leveraged. It really takes it to a whole new level. And if you're not doing that, then your competition might push you out of the way. And you certainly don't want that to happen. But you have to remain future focused as you're thinking about people and projects and project management. And certainly, stay in touch with Val and I as we continue to, share information out to all of you as we move forward. And certainly if something sparked an idea or a thought in your mind, we would love to jump on a call with you and talk about that further. So I am going to ask Kaylee to let us know if we have received any questions. She's nodding her head no, so I will give you a minute or two to type that question into the question and answer box. If you think it's silly, I guarantee there's somebody else who has that same question. They just didn't type fast enough to get it into the box. Val, while we're waiting for people to type in their questions. Is there anything that you want to close out saying? Any other thoughts that you might have that you want to leave the attendees with?
Well, just to echo on, what you mentioned, if questions come to y'all later or you want more information, please feel free to email, and definitely happy to set up a time with you. Several of you did message about, wanting a copy of a sample PM standards manual, and a couple questions about, process for closeout meetings. So I'm happy to meet with those of you that I've already answered. But again, if any of you want to kind of talk through some of those things, I'm very happy to schedule time and talk with you. The important thing to keep in mind, someone, Garrett, hi Garrett. Garrett just asked, it'd be great if there was a project management standards template that could be tailored. I don't know. I struggled with that too, Garrett. What I found working through our recent project is that it's so specific to the types of clients you have, the type of work you do, the tools that you use, and really kind of your firm culture. I don't know. I've kind of thought through that, but for us, I found an example that seemed clean, and we kind of use that as a model. But what I could say is use that life cycle of the project as kind of your contents guide.
And Val, would you please provide the definition for ERP?
Oh, enterprise resource planning. I'm sorry, I should define that the first time. So software programs like Deltek Vision, Deltek Azura, Deltek Advantage Point, where your one system kind of does all. It does your finance operations as well as your project management, reporting, budgeting, resource planning, scheduling, and your workflow for all of those things flows through to your financial statements. Very, very powerful tools. If you find yourself still on QuickBooks, even small firms, the return on investment for an ERP is just exponential.
And Val, could you mention a few examples of software that are used to export information out of ERP systems for project managers? Do you know any?
Yeah, there's several. So the one that we've recently chosen, we use Deltek Vision. We chose a program called Power BI. It's a Microsoft product. The training curve on it was pretty minimal, and it's super cool is the best way I can say it. And you can create, content dashboards with filters so that people can select their own projects. We've imported ours into our SharePoint site. There's lots of them out there. Another one I'm slightly familiar with is called ClickView. So when vetting those programs, you just want to talk to your IT people and make sure, that it's going to interact with all of the systems that you're using. You want one that's easy to access, that people don't have to, jump through a lot of hoops to grab. But those are two I'm familiar with. Super happy with Power BI.
Louisa, I know you're interested in learning more about recommended ERP programs. So, Val, I don't know if you want to speak to that or just take that conversation offline, because it really depends on industry and needs and company size and things like that. Val, anything else to say?
Well, yeah, there's like 5 or 6 questions that just came in rapidly, and so since we're running out of time here, I'll be happy to email each one of you and set up time if you want, or converse via email. But yeah, I do have recommendations.
Great. So there were a few questions regarding people. I'm going to answer those, and then any other questions we definitely will reach out individually because we don't want to hold you here longer than we promised. So Martin, you had asked if there are statistics about the percent of engaged versus disengaged versus actively disengaged by generation. I don't have that at my fingertips, but I'll work together with you to try to get that information. I think the employee engagement group might be a great place for you and I to start. And then another question came in about, the younger generations, they want to customize their own roles, but especially in smaller firms, you have, things that they have to do, and you don't have the flexibility to let them just go full force customizing everything. They have to recognize that they, have a job and that they need to commit to that job, and, how do we keep them engaged and so forth. So I would say pick the battles. We have to allow them to customize to a certain extent. So creating those boundaries or opening up the discussion and the communication to talk about what that looks like in your organization. Where can they be creative? When can they customize or share ideas? And then, where can't they so easily? And tell them why. Why is that? Get them to buy into that. And then certainly your organization as a culture has to be open to getting feedback, talking through the feedback, maybe implementing some of the suggestions so people feel that their voice is heard. And then also, just helping employees to feel like, hey, they really are working with us and helping us and so forth. And I think, the phrase is about scratching each other's back. So it really is about just opening the conversation, setting boundaries and expectations, and then if that starts to go to the wayside or slide outside of the boundaries, have the conversation at that time instead of letting it build up. So I want to thank all of you for being on the webinar today. We greatly appreciate your attention because we know an hour is a lot of time, and especially in the middle of your afternoon. Val, thank you so much for your insights and suggestions and advice. And anybody who we weren't able to answer your question, we will circle back around to you. As soon as we close down this webinar, within a few minutes, you will get that survey that Kaylee had talked about at the beginning, and you will go ahead and complete that, please, so that way we can issue out any credits as well as use that feedback as the foundation for future webinars. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you.